Hey, this is Steve Stine from guitarzoom. And if you're ever in a situation where you're dealing with more hard rock or metal situations and you need to solo over the top, you know, what I want you to think about a little bit is expanding your pentatonics to include some things that, again, may or may not necessarily make sense in the music theory world. And this is something that I explore to a great detail in a course that I have that deals with guitar soloing kind of from a cheater's perspective, where you're thinking about kind of from a bird's eye view of when to use what. When you're approached with a particular chord progression or a major key or a minor key or a rock kind of song, what's the best thing to use when you don't have a lot of time to figure out the right scale, right? So when you're dealing with something that kind of gives you the sense of metal, hard rock and metal, we know predominantly we're going to be using minor somehow. So we might be using minor pentatonic, or we might be using the Aeolian scale, if you know that. And again, we'll talk about all these things in the course. But a really neat thing to do to have some fun with this is to simply expand your pentatonic, if that's kind of where you are, by adding in some really neat things. Now, the first thing we'll talk about here that I want you to mess around with is just adding in unusual bending places. And usually what you can do is you can bend from just about any note in your pentatonic from a half step down, okay? And it gives it this element of exotic sound. So what I want you to do is just focus on a couple of things here. The first one is, if we were in E minor pentatonic, I want you to go up to the 14th fret of the 3rd string. Now, normally we would bend that up a whole step, and that would be our usual bend that we would use, our traditional sort of rock bend, which is great. We can still use that. But what I want you to explore here is moving to the 13th fret, which is not pentatonic, and it doesn't fit in the Aeolian scale or anything like that, okay? What I want you to explore here is bending that up a half step. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to play the 14, and then right after I play that 14, I'm going to play the 13. And here's kind of the trick to it is when you go to play the 13, already be kind of pre-bending it a little bit, so you don't have far to go to hit the bend, which all I'm doing is bending it up to a 14. Okay, and then adding a little vibrato on there. So the trick to making it sound more exotic is don't start, not that you can't start all the way down, because you certainly can. What sounds really good if you do that, if you start all the way down on the 13, is give it a nice big scoop. But if you start a little bit above, it sounds even more bizarre. And then give it a nice wide vibrato. And it breaks up the monotony of that pentatonic scale, okay? So that's a really nice place of being able to do that, and you can do it anywhere. Another really neat place to do that is on the root itself. So if you have this E, and you do the same thing there, right? So I play the note, and then I bend it right afterwards. It sounds kind of neat. So if I was soloing, that's what it sounds like. Okay? Now sometimes, again, there's no rules to these. There's no right or wrong. You just have to explore things. When it comes to playing the E or the root, what I like to do is oftentimes I won't play it and then play the 13 right before it. I'll play the 13 instead. So I have, and I'll do that instead. And again, it gives it this kind of bizarre sound. You have to mess with your bending a little bit, and I still think like having a nice wide vibrato sounds really nice over the top, but that's a personal preference. And of course, you can explore these sorts of things anywhere on the fretboard. So it doesn't just have to be those two, it could be anything. But I'm just showing you those two sound quite exotic and quite bizarre, okay? Now, the cool thing about this note right here, the 13, is that when we add that note in, we're actually playing kind of the beginnings of what we call harmonic minor, okay? So we can actually use that note, instead of bending it, we could actually just play it. And where I want to show you that is up here on the top. So normally we would have 15 and 12 pentatonically. What we're going to do is we're going to add in the 11. Because this is the E, right? Right here. And see how cool that sounds? So it makes for, again, a really neat sound. So I could bend that like I was just talking about. But the other thing that's really neat about it is I could just play it. So I'm not locking myself into thinking, well, I'm in this scale, or I'm in this mode, or I'm in harmonic minor. Again, I'm just trying to have some fun with the sounds that I'm making, and not just saying, well, this is what I have and that's all I get. There's nothing wrong with that either, right? But it's for you to have some fun exploring some of these sounds. Okay? So those are a couple things that I'd like you to think about a little bit and see if you can utilize, if you like that kind of sound and you're more of a hard rock or metal player, see if you can utilize those in your playing a little bit. And you can always check out my course, my guitar course, and see if that helps you a little bit in moving the bar up even further and giving you some confidence in being able to choose the right answer right away, right? So if you're with other people or you're jamming, you know, in whatever situation you might be in, knowing when to play the right scale. You know, if you're like me, you know, you wind up playing with a lot of different people using a lot of different things. So sometimes you're in majors, sometimes you're in minor, sometimes you're playing blues, sometimes you're playing rock. And it's just nice to know what's going to work when you're in that situation so you don't play the wrong thing. So anyway, take care. Hopefully this helps you a little bit. Stay positive in your practice, and we'll talk to you soon.